Welcome to the Lakers Nation podcast. My name is Trevor Lane. Today's show is brought to you by Harry's Razors. Head to harrys.com/Lakers for an awesome deal on some high quality razors. On today's show, we have an absolutely packed day. I start things off with Jordan Schultz of Bleacher Report and the Huffington Post. We're going to get into all those crazy Lonzo Ball rumors that we're hearing about the Lakers potentially passing on Lonzo Ball with the second overall pick. We're going to talk about that, why they might be looking at doing that. We'll also get into the Jordan Clarkson trade rumors and connect the dots and figure out how that ties in to the Paul George situation. After that, we're going to jump into some draft talk with the amazing Mike Schmitz from Draft Express. That's the guy that creates all the fantastic videos that everybody's watching this time of year, breaking down all the top prospects, and he has some phenomenal insight into each and every single one of the players the Lakers could be considering with the second overall pick, as well as a handful of guys they could snag with that 28th pick in the draft. Big show today. Let's jump right into it. All right, I've got Jordan Schultz of the Huffington Post and Bleacher Report here on the Lakers Nation podcast. Jordan, thanks so much for taking the time to come on the show.
Anytime. Thanks, Trevor. No problem, man.
So right now, all the buzz is about a story that you've really been on top of, and that's this rumor that Lonzo Ball may not be the guy for the Lakers with the second overall pick. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. So I think, with the Lakers, there's a lot to consider, and obviously this is a team that believes they have some really good young pieces. Obviously, Brandon Ingram is there, and you can really build around him. And I think with Rob Pelinka and Magic and a young coach in Luke Walton, one of the issues that I've heard is that with a guy like Lonzo comes the potentially polarizing lightning rod that is LeVar. And I'm not sure, A, that the Lakers are ready to take that on. And then just from an on-the-court perspective, Ball is a really good player, and obviously you guys in L.A. saw him all year at UCLA. But there's also a guy that struggled at times against really elite quickness. We saw it in the tournament against De'Aaron Fox. I think his jump shot is a question mark. He's not great in pick and roll. And there is a concern that his game won't translate into becoming a star. And if you're picking it too, obviously you have to be pretty sure that you're getting a franchise-altering type of player, and the Lakers aren't sure at this point. And obviously they haven't worked him out yet, but they're not sure that Ball is that guy.
So most of the main draft sites out there, most of the reports that we've heard have been saying that the Lakers would take Ball and that LeVar wasn't too big of a concern. At least that's what they've said publicly. But of course, we wonder what may be going on, behind closed doors. So I got to ask, I would never ask you to reveal your sources, but are you hearing things more from inside the organization, or is it teams outside of the organization that we're getting this from?
Yeah, it's not really within the organization, because I don't think it would help them at all to have reports out there. Like, I don't think this really helps them. If they like Lonzo, or even if they don't like him, like I've been told, that if you're going to potentially make a trade, or they really don't want to reveal what they're thinking potentially. And obviously, like you said, the mocks have had him going to LA for the most part. I do think there's a lot to be said about what the Lakers want this draft to be from a, not just on the court, but like the actual perception of it. And, if you draft a guy like Lonzo Ball, obviously there's a big risk factor because of the LeVar Ball stuff. And I think we're being naive if we don't think that has anything to do with this.
Right. Yeah, they have talked about getting a certain character of player coming in, and, Lonzo himself, he seems to be a pretty quiet guy.
He's a good kid.
Yeah.
He's a good kid.
There. But
he's LeVar. A good kid, and people around him like him, and I don't think that's really the issue here. I think it's do they, to make it as simple as possible, do they believe LeVar is going to be an issue long term, and B, perhaps just as importantly, do they believe that Lonzo is a superstar, or at least an all-star caliber point guard?
Now, they haven't worked him out yet, but you were suggesting on Twitter that maybe they don't think that he's a superstar. So that's kind of what you're hearing at this point?
Yeah, I think there's a concern, and I don't think this is just with the Lakers. I think some teams really love him, and I think other teams are having a very hard time evaluating him. I think he's one of the harder prospects in general to evaluate, just because of the fact that, you know, he has that funky jump shot. He's an unconventional point guard in today's day and age, and that he's an old school point guard. You know, forget his size, which is obviously a big plus, but you know, he's a pass first guy, and he did help change the culture of UCLA in just 1 year, and that's a big deal. So I think many people would say it behooved the Lakers to take a guy like that. He's certainly a really talented prospect, but I do think there is a sentiment league bound from what I've been told that maybe he isn't a franchise altering guard.
Now, there were some theories going around online that I saw about this way of thinking from the Lakers, and one of the theories that I found kind of interesting was that maybe some of this information is being put out there by a team that would like Lonzo Ball to work out for them, and so they're trying to put info out there that would make him believe that the Lakers won't actually take him. Do you give any validity to that kind of idea?
No, I wouldn't put much into that. You know, Trevor, I do think that it has been, I would say, strange to me would be the word I would use, that he doesn't really want to work out for anybody else. Obviously, Philadelphia looks like that's happening. But I do think it's weird, strange, whatever you want to call it, that he's just basically saying, I want to go to L.A. That's not, if you go back and look at the history of drafts, 5, 10, 15 years, that's not a very common thing, and it's not. I just don't think publicly it looks good at all if you just say I want to work out for this team or one or two teams. I don't really like that strategy, and I think that's, again, you know, the issue of a guy like LeVar Ball is how much is he going to be involved on a day-to-day basis.
Right, and it does bring into question how much their brand, the Big Baller brand, is coming into play here, because they can probably make a lot more money on that brand if they're in LA with the Lakers than with another organization. So that could be part of the driving force here behind them just going for the Lakers. But now, you're a man of many talents here. You didn't just talk about the Lonzo Ball story. You've also been reporting on Jordan Clarkson, and we've been hearing the rumors that the Lakers could be looking to trade him. So what have you heard there?
Yeah, the Clarkson stuff is almost more interesting to me in the sense that, you know, there's been growing sentiment, I think, that they're at least considering shopping him. And what I've been told is that not only are they considering it, but that they're actively seeking out offers for him. Now, that doesn't mean he's going to be traded, but he's an interesting prospect because he's still only 24 years old. He doesn't shoot the ball particularly well, but, you know, he can guard a couple positions. He can really play both guard spots. His contract is relatively friendly, and I think it would behoove the Lakers, if they are going to make a trade, to do it obviously before the draft, whether it's getting a pick or something else. But I do think that there's a very good chance ultimately that Clarkson is dealt.
Now, do you have any sense as to what the Lakers would be looking for in return for Jordan Clarkson?
That, I think that's a little murkier, but I wouldn't put it past them on any level that they wouldn't want. I mean, like, I feel like a pick would make a lot of sense, and to get a little friendlier in terms of the salary cap. I'm not sure. I wish I could give you more intel. I just don't have it on exactly what they're looking for. But I do think, obviously, they feel like they can get a fair amount for him. A, because his contract is friendly, and B, because at 24 years old, he's a guy that can come in and play on he could help a playoff team, and he can also be part of a rebuilding project. So I do think they feel like he does have a fair amount of value.
Right, and you know, the speculation that they could potentially be looking for a pick or something like that actually does make some sense, because Magic Johnson stated a couple of weeks ago that the Lakers are looking to be a player not necessarily in this summer's free agency, but in 2018. Yeah, when Paul George is up there, and we know they would have to clear a little bit of cap space in order to get to a max level offer for Paul George. So that could be part of it. If Jordan Clarkson is moved and his roughly $12 million salary is moved, maybe that does free up some cap space. I mean, it would in this summer, but also more importantly in the future when Paul George is available. So maybe this is part of a bigger picture strategy here.
Yeah, I think we certainly can't overlook that. And you know, Paul George, you know, he's whether you think he's a top 10 guy, a top 15 guy, he's a terrific player. He's 27 years old. He's from Palmdale. He's a California guy. If they brought in a guy like Paul George, potentially, just thinking long term here to build around him and a guy like Brandon Ingram, then obviously you got two really exciting young wings who I think could certainly play together because they're both so versatile, and that's really exciting if you're a Laker fan. So this is definitely, I think the sentiment of helping clear cap is certainly valid.
So let me ask you this, Jordan. If the Lakers are unable to find a deal that they really like for Clarkson, would you be in favor of moving some of the young pieces now in order to add Paul George this summer, even though he's going to be a free agent in 2018?
Yeah, for me, the answer is definitively yes. That's just me. I think if you look at the Lakers right now, who do you really love if you're a Laker fan? You love the upside of Brandon Ingram. I think that's fair, and I think pretty much all Laker fans would say that they feel like he can be a franchise-altering type of player. But then you start to look at who else? D'Angelo Russell is fine. You can move him over to the 2. He's a young player who he's a good player. I think you realize at this point he's probably not going to be a superstar player. You look at Julius Randle, who has improved, but again, not really a franchise-altering guy. And then we talked about Clarkson, who's making $12.5 million. So those are 3 players right there that could potentially, you can make the argument that let's move them to really build something greater. And obviously this year at 2, whether it's Lonzo Ball or whomever they end up taking, assuming they keep the pick, you feel like you could really build around 2 or 3 guys like that, including a Brandon Ingram.
Right. So the Lakers are definitely going to be a team to watch here coming into the NBA draft. I just wrote a piece for LakersNation.com all about it, how they kind of are a wild card. I mean, Magic Johnson and Rob Pelinka, this is their first NBA offseason, right, and nobody really knows what they're going to do, right?
Yeah, it's true. I mean, we don't have any history to really judge it from, with Magic or Pelinka. I mean, Pelinka's been in the agency world, one of the top-tier agents, but we don't really know. We don't have any really thing to judge him from in the past, from a personnel perspective, because he hasn't been on an NBA front office. And with Magic, I think this is a big deal for him, and it's a hard first year because there's a lot of different ways he could possibly go. I've known Magic a very long time, and I can tell you that he will look at every single possible option and evaluate it, and I think hopefully talk to his team, because obviously he is green in the sense of this type of power in a front office. So there's a lot of different ways they can go. There's a lot of pressure to get it right. And obviously with the Lakers, rebuilding 1 or 2 years, now you're starting to push. How much longer do we really want to feel like we're rebuilding for?
Right. So for the time being, all we can really do is just hope that they are able to make the correct decisions and navigate the team through the summer. But they're absolutely going to be one of those wild card teams, and one of the teams that may surprise us. And who knows, maybe there's a Jordan Clarkson trade coming. And I think the number 2 pick in the draft just got a lot more interesting, at least in my mind anyway, because everybody has been pretty much saying this draft is going to be Markelle Fultz, then Lonzo Ball, then it really starts with Philly at the 3rd pick. It's sounding more like it's going to start with the Lakers at the 2nd pick. I believe you even reported a week or so ago that Boston is pretty locked in on Fultz, right?
Yeah, but it's funny because with Boston, it's like throughout the year it seemed like, well, regardless of who was going to get it before we knew Boston, it felt like Fultz was going to be the number 1 guy. Then there was like a sentiment that maybe he wasn't going to go 1 and he had fallen a little bit. But now I feel like it's pretty cemented that Boston is going to take Fultz and build around him, obviously. And whether or not they keep Isaiah Thomas, we'll learn obviously very soon. But they feel like he's the guy. And then it becomes, as opposed to becoming really interesting at 3 with Philly, I think it becomes super interesting with LA at 2, because they could obviously go a lot of directions, whether it's Ball, whether it's Fox, maybe a Josh Jackson. You want to throw out a real wild card of Jayson Tatum. Are they going to keep the pick? Right. So that's where it gets really interesting.
All right. Well, hey, Jordan, thank you so much for stopping by the show and coming on here and filling us in. This is fantastic information. We're definitely going to have you on here again in the future.
Anytime, Trevor. Thanks, my man.
That was Jordan Schultz. You can follow him on Twitter at Schultz_report. Great stuff. Certainly appreciate him coming on. Next up, we're going to have Mike Schmitz from Draft Express. He's going to break down some of the top draft candidates for us. We're going to jump into some NBA draft discussion with Mike Schmitz in just a moment, but first I want to talk to everybody about shaving. You guys know I'm a big proponent of Harry's razors. They are fantastic stuff. The quality that these razors offer is just phenomenal. I use them every day, and I would never go back to my store-bought razors. It's not even close. The Harry's razors just blows away the competition. Really is incredible stuff. Now, the awesome thing that they're doing right now is actually have a Father's Day gift put together out of their razor sets. And in this limited edition Father's Day set, you get a storm gray razor handle, which looks fantastic, a chrome razor stand, foaming shave gel, 3 replacement blades, and a travel cover for this razor. Plus, if you want, you can actually engrave it with your dad's initials, which is such a classy touch. Now, in order to get this, you want to go to harrys.com/Lakers. Go right now, and you'll actually get a special deal for fans of the Lakers Nation podcast. Harry's will give you an extra $5 off one of their shave sets. This is for a limited time, so you want to go do that right now. Again, harrys.com/Lakers. Okay, get $5 off, help support this show, win-win deal. We certainly appreciate you heading over there and checking out Harry's Razors. Today on the show, I've got Mike Schmitz of Draft Express. If you've been doing any research at all into the Lakers draft, which is coming up on June 22nd, you have probably seen Mike's work. DraftExpress.com does a phenomenal job of providing all kinds of info for fans to look at. Plenty of fantastic videos breaking down every single prospect. Mike, thanks so much for joining the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. It's an exciting time of year for sure.
Yeah, definitely. You know, Lakers fans were sweating it for a while there heading into the draft lottery, but fortunately they were able to emerge with the 2nd overall pick. So I was thinking today we can break down some of the prospects that they can consider with that pick, as well as maybe some guys that they can look at with the 28th pick.
Sure.
All right, so let's kick things off. You know, the guy that I like, and it seems like he's at the top of most draft boards. I just think this guy's so special. That's Markelle Fultz. I don't think he's going to be there for the Lakers to draft, but what's your take on him real quick, just in case he does fall in the draft?
Yeah, I think he's a special talent. I think he's one of these modern lead guard types when you talk about, you know, a guy like James Harden, who's maybe not like your traditional point guard, but has size, can play out of pick and roll, can shoot off the dribble, and can really pass. I think that's part of his game that maybe, you know, wasn't emphasized as much just given the talent level at Washington. He was asked more to score. You know, the spacing wasn't ideal, and you know, they were behind pretty big every game. So they kind of leaned on him to go get buckets for them. But I think you're going to see more in the NBA, a guy who's really, really unselfish, who's a creative passer, can score at all 3 levels. So, yeah, I mean, just to see his trajectory from where he was, you know, this is a kid who didn't play varsity basketball until his junior year. He's really got an incredible story. So I think he has, you know, superstar written all over him.
Definitely a late bloomer, and I think, at least my take from watching some of his games at Washington, is that when he gets to the NBA and he's got better players around him, I think his passing game is really going to blossom. I think that's when we're going to find out just how good of a passer he really is.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. And, you know, there's still some areas to clean up for him, I think. You know, he shot it well from 3 this year, but he'd always been kind of a streaky shooter coming in. You know, there's some defensive stuff. I think he can play with a little bit more effort, but, you know, you could say that for a lot of guys in this draft. So, yeah, I think, to me, he's the guy at the top. But, you know, with Danny Ainge and the Celtics, I know they like to keep their cards close, and they have a lot of talent now. So, you know, I would assume they're going to, you know, test the market and see what's out there trade-wise. And I would assume it's Fultz, but you just really never know with those guys. So, but to me, yeah, he's the top prospect.
Yeah, that reminds me of last year's draft when everybody thought that Boston was going for Chris Dunn and that they were going to try to move the pick to a team that wanted Dunn and all that. And then suddenly the pick comes in and it's Jaylen Brown. So I guess you never really know what Boston's going to do, but it does really seem like he's at the top of the draft board. I mean, if for whatever reason the Celtics don't take him or they trade the pick to somebody who doesn't take Markelle Fultz, the Lakers should absolutely take him at 2, right?
Yeah, I think he's kind of in a tier of his own. I like Lonzo a lot, but I think Fultz is the guy this year.
Okay, so let me put you on the spot a little bit here, and let's say that Fultz does go off the board at 1, just like everybody's expecting, and the Lakers pick comes up. If the selection were up to you, who do you take there?
I draft Lonzo. I think he is just a special talent, and I really like how he can fit with the current roster. Not that it's, at number 2, you're taking the best player available, and I think he is that also, right. But I just think that in LA, where there's so much onus to bring in free agents and to attract guys, kind of back to LA and playing in that market, I think having a point guard who really, really shares the ball like him, gets guys open shots, gets guys paid, in addition to a lot of the other things he does in terms of his defensive instincts, his shot making ability, his size. I just think it's kind of a match made in heaven. We're not totally sure, I think, what the Lakers are going to do, just given the new regime there, and Magic and Pelinka don't have much of a track record to go off of. But from my perspective, I think he is the second best prospect in the draft, and I think he's a perfect fit with the Lakers.
Now, I agree with you there, and I actually just wrote a piece for Lakers Nation all about how the Lakers are kind of a wild card, because like you said, we don't know what Magic Johnson and Rob Pelinka are going to do. We don't know, and they don't have that history, so we're not sure exactly how they're going to act here at the draft, what kind of trades they're going to explore, all that. So there's a lot of unknown there. But when you look at a guy like Lonzo Ball, the passing ability is certainly attractive. Now, when I was going through his games, watching him play at UCLA, it really felt like he didn't do a whole lot for long stretches of the game, and then you go and you look at his usage rate, and that confirms that. It seemed like he had a very low usage rate, especially for a guy who was a college star. Is there any justification for that, or does that give any concern when he jumps to the NBA?
I kind of like it, to be honest. I like the fact that he's not a guy who just pounds the ball. I think it makes him a lot easier to play with, in that he moves it. He's a ball mover. He's not one of these, let me drag out the clock and just high ball screen and let's go. I think part of that, in the fact that he's not a late clock shot creator or a great pick and roll or ISO shot creator, is a little bit concerning, but I think that's a little bit overplayed, just given the fact that he has size, he can shoot, and he really moves the ball. So, I will say there were times throughout the year when you would wait for him, like, okay, like let's go, let's get it going. When are you going to show up? Right. And he usually would. And I think, he has a little bit of a gamer about him. Maybe he's a little casual at times, but he made some big shots throughout the year. And, to your point, I really like the fact that he's not a guy who dribbles the air out of the ball.
Yeah, especially on this Lakers team. I'm with you on that, because they've got D'Angelo Russell, they've got Julius Randle, two guys who really excel with the ball in their hands. That's when they show their strength. Brandon Ingram can play off the ball a bit, but still he ultimately likes creating his own looks. So having a guy like Ball, at least offensively, seems like it would be a nice piece to add to that rotation. Now, when you've got Ball going in on the defensive end, though, I think that's where concerns start to pop up, especially playing alongside D'Angelo Russell, who nobody really considers a plus defender at this stage. Are Ball's defensive issues getting overblown right now, or is there a real reason for concern about how he can translate to the NBA defensively?
I don't think there should be that much concern. I think he's not going to be a stopper type of guy. You know what I mean? You certainly don't want opposing guards to just be able to lick their chops and get a full head of steam and go at him and have him be a liability in that regard. But the fact that he has positional, size and length, he's 6'6" with a 6'8" wingspan. That's really big enough to guard ones and twos in terms of size. He needs to get stronger, and he's not physical. I think that's the biggest thing in terms of an on-ball defender. He's just not a very physical guy. So I don't think he's ever going to be a stopper type. But I think what gets lost in translation a lot with him is how instinctual he is. Like, he is always around the ball. He has excellent anticipation. Like I said, he has some length, for his position. So I think he's going to be a really, really good off-ball defender. And, in the NBA, not that being a good point guard defender isn't important, but you're almost getting screened every possession. You know, it's not a lot of like ISO one-on-one stuff like early in the clock. Like I said, you can't have guys just taking advantage of you. But I think the fact that he's so smart is going to cover up a lot of that.
That's a great point. And yeah, in the NBA, they do get screened off a lot. So maybe those issues will be mitigated somewhat by just how the Lakers scheme. Of course, they weren't a great defensive team last year. Don't project to be a great defensive team this year. But still, it's going to be interesting to see how he really fits in on that end, especially next to guys like Russell and Ingram and Randall, who really aren't good defenders either at this point. That'll be a bit of a challenge, I think. But I do like the length that he brings. I do like his anticipation. It seems like he was able to pick up a number of steals at UCLA just by reading where the next pass was going to go and stepping into passing lanes. So I think there's some upside there for him. Now, the one thing that, and I'm a big fan of Lonzo Ball, and I would be thrilled if the Lakers ended up with him. But the other concern that I have about him is that at UCLA, he was pretty much running a system that was tailor-made to him, that was built around his strengths, and he was surrounded by shooters. And if he ends up with the Lakers, he's not quite going to have that. I mean, Brandon Ingram, we saw him hit 41% from three at Duke. Didn't happen in the NBA. Didn't translate, at least not yet. We know he's working hard on it this summer. Julius Randle is still very much developing as a three-point shooter. Even D'Angelo Russell was only hitting about 35% from downtown last season. So is that something that he's going to be able to work around? Or if the Lakers draft Ball, should they be doing everything they can this summer to grab shooters to play with him?
Yeah, I mean, here's my thing, right? So with Lonzo, like, I get it if his style was like this ancient ground and pound style that's like outdated, you know what I mean? Like, you gotta do all these things to fit it. But like the way he plays is exactly pretty much how almost every team in the NBA wants to play. Shooting at 4 or 5 positions, getting up and down. So it's like teams should be trying to get bigs who can shoot, athletes who can get up and down, regardless of whether Lonzo Ball is their point guard. So I think there's a symmetry there that's natural in that. That's where the league is trending, and that's what you want. So, like, the fact that his style is that, I think, is a positive. And sure, they do need shooting. Like I said, whether he's the guy or it's someone else, they need bigs who can shoot. Because Julius Randle, isn't exactly that. A lot of guys on the rest of their roster, Zubac's looking long term is more of a 15-foot type of guy. I think Ingram will come around as a shooter. But I had those concerns a little bit, not just so much with the shooting, but with Lonzo coming in, I kind of posed the same question to myself. I was like, all right, I saw this kid in high school with Chino Hills, and they were throwing, one-handed outlet passes, like just deep bombs, like Hail Mary types, like almost every possession. It was a very helter-skelter style. And I was wondering, like, man, how is this going to fly in a more structured system? At UCLA, they're going to get on him for shot selection for this. And he just brought it with him, like he changed, like he's so good in transition and so good finding guys in the open floor, and he passing guys open, and his passing so infectious that like he just brought the entire thing with him. And it's hard to say for sure that that's going to happen at the NBA level, but I would bet on it. I just think that the way that he moves the ball, the way that he gets up and down, the way that he incentivizes guys to run the floor, like that's going to be infectious.
Yeah, that's a great way to phrase it. And I was writing about Lonzo Ball about a week or so ago, and I said the Lakers want to get that infection, whatever that is, that ball movement infection. They want Lonzo Ball to be patient zero for that, because he really could change the entire culture of the offense, and I think that's what Luke Walton wants. So it could be very, very exciting if they do end up drafting him. Now, I don't know if you would agree with this, but I would say that next after Lonzo Ball, I would look at Josh Jackson. Would you be in agreement with that for the next pick?
Yeah, from my perspective, I think he's the third best prospect. There's just something about him in terms of his mentality. He kind of teeters on that line of intense and crazy sometimes. but I think he channels it in the right way. He channels it in a competitive nature. He's going to get a tactical every once in a while. He's going to scream at a teammate every once in a while, similar to kind of like a Draymond mentality.
Right.
But I think it's going to lead to winning, and he was a huge part of what Kansas was able to do, as a freshman. He's an intense guy. He's athletic. There's a lot of questions about his shot and his free throw percentage and all that. But I will say, this guy has always made shots. Maybe it's at a 32% clip. Maybe it's 37. Maybe it's somewhere in between. It's not the most natural stroke, but he's always made shots. And so I think, he's just really versatile. He's a two-way guy. I like Josh a lot.
Do you think he can get away with playing some minutes at the 4 in the NBA, or is he going to be strictly a 2-3?
To me, he's more of a 2-3, whereas a guy like Jayson Tatum, I think, is more of a 3-4. Josh just doesn't have a huge frame, and he's 20. He's a little bit on the older side, so I think he's going to do what he can to maximize it, but he doesn't have those broad shoulders of a Jayson Tatum. He has decent length for a 2, average to below average for a 3, but I think he can play the 2-3, no problem. But yeah, I mean, it would be nice if he could slide up to the 4 a little bit, but I think he's more of a 2-3.
I wonder about his fit a little bit with the Lakers because, with Brandon Ingram already in place, I'm not sure that you really want Josh Jackson taking minutes away from Ingram, and I don't know if you really want either one of them playing a ton of minutes at the 2, especially with the lack of shooting. I think that you need some more shooting there on the wing. What's your thought on the overall fit? I know we both agree that Ball would be a great fit. I feel like Josh Jackson isn't quite as good of a fit as Lonzo would be.
Yeah, I mean, it's the shooting is always going to cause some concern. I think you hope that Ingram becomes a better shooter. I like that Josh gives them another guy who can play and pick and roll, and who can really pass. I like that side of it. I like the fact that he brings a mentality that maybe those other guys don't necessarily possess at this stage of their career. I think with D'Angelo and with Ingram, sometimes you want to rev them up a little bit and get them going. They can be a little sleepy, and whereas Josh is a fairly intense guy all the time. So I kind of like the infusion there that he could bring. Mm-hmm. And I think with a guy of his talent, for whatever reason, if they had the 3rd pick, or I think you just draft him and figure it out. Especially when, he's a guy who can play out of a ball screen and pass. Then you have a lot like Lonzo. If you're playing Julius, Ingram, Russell, and a guy like Josh, you have 4 guys who can dribble and pass. And I think with the way that Luke wants to play, that's a solid fit. But the shooting is the concern, I think.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I feel like really the team that needs to be just praying that he drops to them is the Phoenix Suns. I feel like that would be a fantastic team for him.
Yeah, I think the Suns, could go a lot of different directions, whether it's him, whether it's De'Aaron Fox. I think it kind of depends on what they think their long-term solution is, whether it's Bledsoe or, they have Knight under contract. But yeah, Josh is a really talented kid, man. I like his makeup. I like his athleticism. I think he does a lot of different things. So, we could look back. I mean, my thing is we could look back in 5 years and he could be the best prospect in this draft. We do all this homework but to me, you never really, really know until the ball's rolled out in an NBA game, and the situation is very, it's very dependent on the situation. So I like what he brings to the table for sure.
Now, you mentioned that you have Markelle Fultz in your top tier. So then your second tier, is Lonzo in tier 2 on his own, or is it Lonzo and Josh Jackson and anyone else included in that?
I think Lonzo's in his own little class there, and then for me, Josh, Jayson, and De'Aaron are all kind of in a class right after. Okay,
so let's talk Jayson Tatum real quick then. Tatum is intriguing to me. He's quite a talented scorer. I don't know about the fit, and I'm concerned about his ability to stretch out to NBA 3, even though there was a video that came out about a week or so ago that showed him practicing that NBA 3, and he made like however many in a row. But still, what's your general take on Jayson Tatum and him jumping to the NBA?
I think he's going to be really good. I think we're maybe not even talking about him enough, just in that he has the prototype frame. He's really fluid. He's a big-time worker. He's been working with Drew Hanlon for a long time, and he's really, really polished. And I think, late in games, you kind of see the value of guys like him who can be a mismatch. I like him as a small ball four, and I like his fit there. I think he has soft touch. He's always had soft touch. He's always shot it really, really well from the line. So maybe he's not going to be the most dynamic shooter, but I think if he's able to play a lot of minutes at the four where there's more time and space to get your shot off, closeouts are longer, then I think he's going to be an effective enough shooter to keep defenses honest. So while he is more of an isolation guy, I think there's a lot of value in that. So again, I think he's another one of these guys who we could look back in a few years and say, okay, he's, arguably the best prospect to come from this draft. There are some downsides in that he has some bad habits, I think, like a lot of guys his age in terms of, not always making the quickest decisions as a ball mover. Sometimes the defensive intensity you'd like to be ramped up a little bit. But I think he's going to have a really, really good career.
Do you think he can protect the rim well enough to be a true NBA four? I mean, we know teams are always looking for shooting and rim protection from the four, especially today. And then we're seeing more of the passing from the four as well. We're seeing playmaking fours start to become popular. Do you think Jayson Tatum can fit any of those roles, or is he going to have to kind of do his own thing and carve his own path?
Well, I think that he's a guy who can, maybe he starts at the three and then slides up to the four and kind of plays half his minutes at each position. I think in these small ball lineups, especially, you're not really getting a lot of rim protection from the four, even in more traditional lineups. I think it's really been more so the five who is the guy who puts a lid on the rim. And I think, he's going to be a better passer too. He has a good basketball IQ. He's just been relied on to score so much. I don't worry very much with him about can he, I think he can guard a four because he has good length. He has a big reach. And he has pretty good instincts. So I'm not sure he's ever going to be like a lockdown defender. I think he's going to be a very adequate defender at the NBA level. And I think he's going to fill out enough and have enough length to kind of give you, half of his minutes as kind of the small ball four.
Okay, fair enough. So the other guy, well, Jayson Tatum hasn't quite been linked to the Lakers just yet, but we know that one guy that they are going to be working out is De'Aaron Fox. And I struggle with De'Aaron Fox. He's super talented. Of course, he lit up Lonzo Ball in the tournament. In fact, the two times they played him, he definitely got the better of Lonzo Ball in UCLA when Fox was at Kentucky. And there's a lot to like there, but I definitely question the fit. I question the shot, whether that's going to come around. Are you higher on me than De'Aaron Fox?
Yeah, I like De'Aaron. I just think that with his explosiveness and the fact that, he shot the ball a lot better than he showed throughout his high school career. He and Dennis Smith actually coming into this year were very similar level shooters. The college sample size is really small. I don't think mechanically he has many issues, to be honest. I think he's going to be a guy who early on in his career is really good from the elbows and then is able to, step out eventually and at least keep defenses honest, when defenders go under screens. A lot like, kind of like a Mike Conley progression, I think. They had similar level stats in college, and he's turned himself into a very reliable, outside shooter. So I like De'Aaron, man. He has size, he has positional length, he's a competitor. I think he's the most functional athlete in the draft. There are questions about scoring in the half court, but I believe in his talent and I believe in his mentality, and I think he's maybe not the best fit with the Lakers, but I think he's, to me, the fifth best prospect in the draft.
Okay. I think defensively the fit is certainly there, but it's the offensive side of the ball that I would be a bit concerned about. Now, there are some signs though that maybe his shot is better than what we saw in college, and you kind of alluded to that. I mean, his free throw percentage was actually really good. It was better than Lonzo Ball and better than Markelle Fultz. So do you think it's just more of a matter of time before his three-point shot comes along? Because if that's the case, then that obviously raises his ceiling considerably.
Yeah, I think he's going to make enough shots. I mean, we have some stats. In 2015 at UIBL, he shot over 21 games. He shot 32% from three on 5 attempts a game. So like he's not a non-shooter to me. He's not like an Elfrid Payton. I think he's going to make enough shots eventually. You can't teach his twitch. I think he's going to be an impact defender. And, there is some value in having a guy who can just break down a defense. That's kind of D'Angelo's problem in a lot of ways. In some regards, is that he's not a guy who's going to blow by you. When you crawl up into him a little bit, he has some issues. A guy like De'Aaron who can break down a defense without a ball screen, if you're able to surround him with shooting, then he's going to be really effective. I like him maybe in Phoenix. I don't know what they're going to do with Bledsoe, but I think if you have Booker, who really shoots it obviously and can play out of a pick and roll, and then you have Marquise Chris, I think, who they think is going to be able to stretch the floor to NBA 3 consistently. Dragan Bender at the 5, who's going to be able to stretch the floor to NBA 3 consistently down the road, and then maybe a guy like TJ Warren or somewhere else in there. Long term, I think you surround him with like a group like that can get up and down and can make shots. I think he's really interesting.
Yeah, that would definitely be a great fit for him again. So we've got Phoenix as a good landing spot for De'Aaron Fox as well as Josh Jackson. I mean, they could be an interesting team if they slide in a few of these pieces. We're seeing most drafts have De'Aaron Fox landing at number 5, I believe, at Sacramento. Think he'll work out there?
I think, for all the heat we give those guys, and I think they're actually in a decent spot. They have 5 and 10 of this draft, and I think they can get their point guard and a guy like De'Aaron. Maybe they covet a guy like Dennis Smith, I don't know, but they can get a guy like him. They have Scala BCA, who really I think outperformed his draft stock this last year. I think Willie Cauley-Stein fits into kind of what a lot of teams are looking for in their 5 in today's age, and that a guy who can switch, who can catch lobs. I think he's steadily improving. And then, Buddy Hield, a guy who really shoots it, I think, next to, De'Aaron. That's not a bad little core. So I think they're, for all the troubles and things like that, I think they're trending up. And I think he would be a solid fit there.
All right. So the last of the main guys that I want to talk about that the Lakers could look at for the number 2 pick is actually a guy that it was just announced that they are going to be working out. That's Dennis Smith Jr. And when I look at the Draft Express website, I see that he is ranked 8th. He's sitting at 8 overall, which would put him in New York. But then when I go and I look at the footage, and admittedly I haven't studied Dennis Smith quite as much as I have these other guys like Lonzo Ball and Josh Jackson, because they just seem to be more towards the front side of the draft. But when I watch him play, I go, man, this guy's phenomenal. What is it that's keeping Dennis Smith from jumping up into that top 5 on most mock drafts?
Yeah, he's super talented. I mean, he was, I believe, in our top 3 to start the year. So, he was a really impressive high school player. He had an ACL, which set him back a little bit, but it doesn't look like he's lost all that much of that explosiveness. The situation at NC State was not great. There was some discord there. The staff was fired, throughout, I want to say maybe 3/4 of the way through the year, and then stayed on, which is always kind of awkward to finish out the year. But you could see that, maybe Dennis wasn't doing everything he could to help that situation along with some of their other guys. The defensive effort, I thought, at times was really underwhelming in a guy who can be a really impactful defender because he's physical, he's quick-footed, and he can really be a pest. I thought that was a little bit underwhelming. But again, put him in a ball screen, with some players around him who can shoot. I think he has a chance to outplay his draft stock. I think being around vets and a coach he really respects is going to be really important for him. Not a bad kid by any means. He's a good kid. There are just some tendencies there, and in terms of making plays that impact winning, that I think can improve for him.
Now, player comparisons are always really difficult. I mean, it's especially in this draft, like Lonzo Ball. I mean, who do you compare him to? I've heard like Jason Kidd, and that's even a bit of a stretch, a hard one to make. But the one that I heard for Dennis Smith Jr. was that was kind of interesting, was that his ceiling would be like a Steve Francis type player. Do you see that in his game?
I do a little bit, yeah. I think he's a guy who relies a lot on his athleticism. He's somewhat of an erratic shooter, but he's really strong and physical going to the rim. I think physically they're fairly similar. He's not like the most polished pick and roll, make every read decision maker, but like he can get into the lane at will and then find guys, which is what he did a lot of at NC State. So I think there are some similarities there. And he's a guy who won Rookie of the Year, Steve Francis, and had a fairly successful career for stretches there. So I see some similarities as well. I think Dennis, situation for him is going to be really important. I think, if he goes to a place maybe like New York where the culture is still evolving and they're going to need him to just go get buckets and go make things happen while still maybe dragging along some of those bad habits. It's easy to typecast a guy as someone who maybe puts up some hollow stats. But if he's able to go somewhere with, a stronger infrastructure with some vets around him, play maybe a little bit smaller of a role initially and kind of develop some good habits and grow into a pro, then I think he, has one of the higher ceilings in this draft.
So in your mind, then, it may be beneficial if Smith were to fall maybe like with Tom Thibodeau at number 7 in Minnesota, or maybe even drop to 9 to the Dallas Mavericks, where you've got Rick Carlisle there and Dirk Nowitzki and some vets in place. That would be a better situation, you think, for him than going at 8 to the Knicks?
Yeah, I really like Dallas for him, just because Carlisle is a guy who people really, really respect. And, then you have a guy like Dirk. You have a strong owner like Cuban. You have a guy like Wesley Matthews who, is really, really tough cookie. And I think that a place like Dallas would be a great fit for him.
Okay.
I don't know if he'll get there, though.
Yeah. I don't know if he'll last, especially if he's working out with some of these teams that are up higher in the draft. But it does seem like the fit would be better at a place like Dallas rather than going to New York or somewhere like that. But we'll see. We'll see how it all shakes out on draft day. Now, the Lakers were also able to snag the 28th pick via the Houston Rockets. They traded Lou Williams in order to pick up that selection. And it's really hard to speculate on who's going to be there. I kind of like that spot in the draft just because somebody who's dropping, you put yourself in a good spot to snag somebody that fell. I mean, I think of Scal last year and how he fell, and the Kings were right around that same pick, and they grabbed him. So who do you think would be the ideal player that the Lakers should hope is there and could realistically be there at 28?
Yeah, I think one guy I really like is Semi Ojeleye. We actually saw him work out here with Drew Hanlon yesterday. He had a little pro day in LA with a lot of NBA scouts, watching there. And I think he's a really interesting fit because, teams are looking for a guy who is physical, who can theoretically defend 3s and 4s. I mean, this guy's 6'7", 240 pounds with 5% body fat. He looks like an NFL linebacker, but he has tremendous feet. He can really sit down and slide. He's super agile, very explosive in space, and he's really turned himself into a really reliable spot shooter, even from NBA 3. So I think he could give the Lakers, somebody who is more physical as a defender, and kind of in like an Artest mold, in that he's not as long, and I think he could maybe use his strength a little bit better on both ends of the floor. But like he's a guy who can at least put a body on a guy like LeBron, or put a body on these big, powerful wings. or even, the small ball 4 types. And I think with Luke, and his willingness to experiment and try different things, I think Shemmy's even a guy you could play as like a super small ball 5, if you wanted to play, Ingram at the 4, and kind of get up and down in that way. So he's a really interesting guy for me. I really like Derrick White from Colorado. I think he's a first-round talent. He's a D2 transfer, averaged 18 points, 4 assists for Colorado, basically his first year playing Division I basketball. So big guard, 6'5", can really pass. Not quite Malcolm Brogdon, but I think could come in and have, to a lesser degree, kind of a surprising quick impact.
Okay, so there's a couple of good options. Obviously, if the Lakers are looking for a wing defender, then you've got an option there with Semi, and then with Derrick White, he does seem like he'd be a solid shooting guard option for them. One name that I'm seeing on Twitter that a lot of Lakers fans are tossing around is Jawun Evans as a backup point guard. What's your take on him?
Yeah, really, really talented. He's small, obviously He's about 5'10", but he's 6'5" wingspan. He plays a little bit bigger just because of his length. He's one of the more skilled, I would say, players in this draft. I'm not sure he's Tyler Ulis, but in terms of like being a complete guy who can, make every read out of pick and roll, who can shoot off the dribble, who has floaters in the lane. He's pretty tough-minded. I like him a lot. I think there are some guys, like I mentioned, who I like a little bit more and who I think are maybe a little harder to find. But I don't think you can go wrong with a guy like Jawun. I think he's going to be a long-time NBA player.
We also had a lot of Lakers fans talking because they recently did a pre-draft workout, and included in that workout was Jordan Bell. And he definitely turned some heads playing for Oregon this year, and Lakers fans see him and they go, man, that could be the type of defender that the team needs. Do you see him being a good fit?
Yeah, absolutely. I love Jordan Bell. I like his fit, in today's NBA, and that he can switch everything. Even though he doesn't have great size, he protects the rim because he's really quick off the floor. He has great instincts. He's an athlete in space. I think the thing that's missed on a lot with him is he can really, really pass. And I think when you combine those things, especially with Luke, and in the way he wants to play, I think his passing ability is going to be really useful. So I like Jordan Bell a lot. He's a Long Beach kid. I think, he'd be a very good fit with the Lakers.
Maybe a little bit of duplication, though, with Larry Nance Jr.?
Not completely. I mean, I think Larry has a little bit more skill. I'd actually like to see Larry, step out. And I think he's shown at times he can stretch it to 18 feet. And I think there's more to be had there with him. And he's longer. He has a bigger reach, maybe even a little bit bouncier. But whereas Bell is maybe more of like a natural rim protector, natural, offensive rebounder. But obviously Nance is really good in all those areas as well. But I think they could work. He can kind of have maybe a Tariq Black impact, but greater. Like more so, just because he can really pass and he can do a lot more things and he's more light on his feet.
Okay, and you'll be happy to hear that Larry Nance Jr. is working on his shot. He's working on his range. I believe him and Ivica Zubac are both taking 100 threes each at the conclusion of every practice. So they are working on stepping out. Hopefully that part of his game does come around, because that would be phenomenal if he could step out and spread the floor a bit. Well, before we get you out of here, Mike, I do want to chat real quick about just the overall strength of this draft. It's always hard to compare one year to another, especially because we don't know exactly how all these players are going to turn out. But compared to, say, the last two drafts, when the Lakers got Brandon Ingram and D'Angelo Russell, how do you feel about the overall quality of this year?
I think it's really good. Like you said, you don't really completely know until, at least a couple years down the road, in my opinion. But I think there's strength at the top, obviously. I think you have a marquee guy, potentially two marquee guys, and Fultz and Ball. And then I think you have guys like Jackson and Tatum who are, at the very least, to me, going to be longtime NBA starters, with potential to be all-stars. And then you have even more depth, throughout the top 10, and Isaac and Smith and Markkanen and Fox. Some very interesting guys. I think the guard play is probably the strongest aspect of this draft. I think you have really 6 or 7 guards who could be even taken in the lottery, which doesn't happen every day. And then there are a lot of bigs. That's going to be the interesting part of all this. The traditional big man is kind of dwindling in some ways, but you have a lot of guys. I mean, Ike Anigbogu, Jared Allen, John Collins, Justin Patton, Harry Giles, Bam Adebayo. It's going to be interesting to see, who slides, because there are only so many spots, and bigs aren't exactly what NBA teams are searching for in today's game.
Yeah, there does seem like they're more after wings, and I don't know if there's a ton of them in this draft. There are a lot of guards, but so we may see wings get taken a little bit earlier than we anticipate.
Yeah, so, I could see that for sure.
So definitely appreciate your time coming on here. Always love checking out your work on draftexpress.com. Did want to ask you, do you know when you guys are going to be updating your mock draft again?
I don't. I would imagine fairly soon. We're just finishing up a lot of these agent-run pro days, and there are NBA execs all out in LA and a lot up in Vegas today. So still kind of gathering, some more information there, but I'm sure you'll see an update fairly soon.
Yeah, when the first mock draft came out after the lottery, the Draft Express website had Harry Giles going to the Lakers at 28, and that sent fans scrambling to go check out clips of Harry Giles, and everybody was buzzing about it. And then it recently changed to Ivan Rabb, and people have been looking at clips of him and seeing what he can do. So I'm always curious to see who's going to end up in that 28th slot for the Lakers. But it sounds like second is going to be Lonzo Ball pretty much no matter what happens with the new draft update coming in.
Yeah, we'll see. I think that's kind of the inkling that we have. But like I said, you really, really never know until the day comes.
True. Yeah, I was talking on Twitter the other day. I was tweeting and said that it was just a couple of years ago when almost up until draft day, everybody had Jahlil Okafor going to the Lakers at 2. And then It suddenly swung, and it was D'Angelo Russell, and that's what ended up happening. So you really don't know, and that's one of the great things about the draft is there's that sense of unpredictability to it. So it always makes it a fun day.
Yeah, it should be fun this year, man. Should be fun.
Absolutely. So once again, Mike, definitely appreciate your time. Thank you so much for coming on the show, and love all of your work at Draft Express.
Thanks a lot, Trevor. I appreciate it, man.
So that was Mike Schmitz from Draft Express. Always fantastic work. Definitely go check that out. That's going to about wrap things up for today. You can check out this show on iTunes, Stitcher, the CLNS radio app, TuneIn, and of course, LakersNation.com. Till next time, my name is Trevor Lane, and this has been the Lakers Nation Podcast.